Join me in the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please. Supervisor Underhill has called in. He's stuck out of town. Everybody else is present. This time we'll open the floor up to citizens' comments. You will have 5 minutes to speak. Please state your name and address for the record to start.
Is it on? Okay. My name is Denise Bell, 4223 29th Avenue. Ladies and gentlemen of the County Board, first and foremost, I want to thank you for listening to my concerns and all of the other jail staff employees over the various meetings that we have attended since 2011. I have talked to you repeatedly about what is an unfair standard for jail staff that doesn't exist for other county employees. The average cost of homes in Kenosha County is about $150,000, $152,330 according to this paper from yesterday. The average cost of Kenosha County homeowner would be about $1.50 per year. So for less than the cost of this soda right here, a year, you can right or wrong. Please take our fight into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Anybody else wishing to speak? Anybody else wishing to speak? Seeing no one else, citizens' comments are closed. Announcements to the chair. First of all, the county executive is seeking to appoint 3 elected officials to the Racine Kenosha Community Action Agency to fill vacancies of Supervisor Hallman, Register of Deeds Louise Principe, and former Supervisor Gail Gens. It's a nonprofit organization that provides programs like WIC, housing assistance, emergency food assistance, works with Human Services Department. So if there's anybody that's willing to sign on to that, please see the county executive's office as soon as possible if you have an interest. Thank you. Also, I'd like to take a minute and thank all the supervisors and the staff and everybody who's put their hard work into this budget. Not always are there clear choices that are easy to make, and we all have to suffer in certain areas when we make these choices. And I think that everything was vetted properly as we went along, and we've done the best we can. Is everything perfect? Does more work need to be done? Yes. But I want to thank you for your support and for coming to the meetings that you have come to and input that you've had. So thank you very much for that. At this point, supervisors' reports. Seeing no supervisor reports, we'll move on.
New business, ordinance, second reading. 18 from Judiciary and Law Committee regarding amendment to section 3.60 of the Municipal Code of Kenosha County. Esposito, yes. Ron Johnson, yes. Boyd Frederick, yes. Arrington, yes. Anita Johnson, yes. Montemero, yes. Noble, yes.
Supervisor Esposito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move ordinance 18.
Ordinance 18 has been moved by Supervisor Esposito, seconded by Supervisor Noble. Supervisor Esposito.
This is an ordinance that came to us from Corporation Council, section 360 of the Municipal Code. Basically, it's a revamping, updating of the old code. There is a book that was used now is going to be online with a URL for people to be able to access. Also, there was some change in fees and so on and so forth. So basically just an updating of what was there, and I urge your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Esposito. Any comments? Seeing no lights. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That ordinance passes.
Policy resolution, second reading from Finance Administration Committee regarding 2013 Kenosha County budget. Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. O'Day, yes. Grady, yes. Colmeyer, yes. Kubicki, yes. Molinaro, yes.
Supervisor Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would move the budget resolution before you, policy resolution number 1.
It's been moved by Supervisor Rose, seconded by Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and board members and ladies and gentlemen. Last night I mentioned some of the factors and some of the high points of the budget. This evening I would like to focus on a few of the issues I think of particular interest this evening. One, I want to begin by complimenting the Brookside leadership, staff, as well as the board for having a surplus this past year. I think they heard the board's direction loud and clear in the past that Brookside could no longer run in the red, that we wanted to see it in the black, and they've accomplished that, and they're going to have a surplus for the year. I think it's a job well done. Hats off to them, and it's the kind of thing that we want to see continue in the future. Same, I think, with golf, and golf has certainly come under a great deal of criticism when we are told that they will probably break even this year, and that's the first time in a long time, and if they do so, again, hats off to them, and I think we certainly want to see that continue in the future as well. And that's part of the reason why we have the reclassifications mentioned in the budget resolution before you, anticipating that that will be the precedent for the future as well. Let me just focus on a couple of things that were left on your desk, which I think are of particular interest. One is the budget summary for 2013, dealing with how did we reach the zero increase over last year. This was the board's resolution. The executive followed that. The finance committee approved it. We're asking you this evening to endorse the finance committee's recommendation to you of the executive's budget. This three-page summary highlights what the budget changes are, the impact on employees, as well as some policy resolutions. The fourth page of that is a document or a chart here which has been prepared by Ehlers. And this has to do with bonding and indebtedness. And I'd like to first bring your attention to this line entitled Overall Debt Per Capita. And where is Kenosha as compared to other counties in the state of Wisconsin? We are number 1. $4,002 overall debt per capita. Now compare that to some of the other counties. Waukesha. Waukesha is a AAA county. It's a growing area. It always has been. Their overall debt per capita is $2,320. Washington County, again, AAA bond rating, $2,059. Ozaki, AAA, $2,508. Outagamie, $1,892. And Brown County, $2,983 per capita. And each one of those AAA bond rating. I think it has been the intent of the administration and the desire of the County Finance Committee with the support of the County Board that we bring down our overall debt per capita from that 4,002 number. That's a number we don't want to be as number one in the state. If our goal is to achieve AAA status, we've got to bring that number down, which leads into my argument, don't change the capital projects this evening. There may be many worthy projects out there. The Mobile Command Unit may be one of those worthy projects. And one can argue it's only $500,000 round numbers. The Finance Committee considered it and cut it. There are other things one could suggest to the board to be added to bonding because, well, it's not going to affect the tax levy this year. But it's going to affect the tax levy in coming years. If we are going to attempt to bring this overall debt per capita down, we've got to begin saying no instead of yes. We've got to begin to say no to items of $500,000 and put them on the back burner for the time being. I'm not suggesting that we never do it, but I am suggesting that it can't be done this evening if you want to do something about the $4,002 per capita. So I urge you, don't touch that capital projects, leave that number alone. You know, just because it's bonding and we don't affect this year's tax levy, it does begin to affect the following years. Because as that bonding has to be paid off, the interest rises year after year, and it begins to affect your operations budget because more and more goes to pay interest, and what happens to the rest of the budget? I mean, you can't every year push taxes up. I mean, that is what we have faced this year as well as in prior years, and that's why we've come through with a zero budget here to attempt to call a halt to expenditure increases. So I would urge your support for the bonding resolution as presented. Don't amend the budget list. Don't include any other items there within that budget bonding requirements. Say we can consider other items in the future. Now, another issue I think that needs to be talked about here is the issue of the request from jailer staff to be paid for the holidays. And I'd like to go back about a year ago when this issue first came before the Finance Committee, and I was a member of the Finance Committee, not the chair. And the administration presented a proposal for the jailers which would have paid them for those holidays. I supported that proposition. The sheriff came before the Finance Committee and said, I have an alternative proposal, which is what you have this evening, this past year, which was supported by the Finance Committee, and a few of us dissented. But that was the decision of the committee. It was endorsed by the board. Unfortunately, the staff, the jailers, did not come forward and oppose the sheriff's proposition. This year, they have come forward to oppose it. But last year, when it was on the table afresh, they didn't oppose it. The sheriff a year ago said the reason we're presenting this alternative proposal is because we operate the jail, we operate the sheriff's department, we know what's best, and we will save money with our proposal, and we anticipate saving just as much as the administration's proposal. The committee deferred to the sheriff's judgment. I say there were a few of us who dissented, and that was that. Now, this issue was approached apparently privately with the sheriff, and the sheriff was certainly free to amend his budget, include holiday pay for those jailer staff, cutting something else from the budget, and including pay for the holidays. It comes down to a matter of priorities, and apparently the sheriff had other higher priorities and suggested come to the county board? Well, I think the Finance Committee, again, took the position and deferred judgment to the sheriff here. You run the sheriff's department, you run the jail, you've submitted a budget within the budget parameters, and that budget was endorsed. Now, what if you decide this evening, and if there is a proposal this evening, to pay for those holidays? The finance director will tell you that it's going to cost approximately $700,000 per year. Could be a little less, but certainly in that range. It will depend upon how many employees you have to hire to accommodate the payment of holiday pay. Keep in mind that this is going to cover approximately 10 employees, their wages, and their health insurance costs. So that's where the $700,000 comes about. And I understand that some people say, well, how could it be that much? Well, again, I have to defer to the judgment here of the finance director. He's always given us reliable information. Mr. Gersten has been accurate on this, and I see no reason this evening to question that judgment. He isn't saying it's exactly 700,000. Maybe it ends up being 650,000. Depends a lot on how many employees have to be hired. But clearly, we're in the neighborhood closer to 10 employees than 2 employees. So that's where the $700,000 extra comes about. So if you want to do something about this issue, you want to be responsible, where is this $700,000 going to come from? Are you just going to say, well, we'll add it to the budget and increase the levy and let the Kenosha taxpayer pay it, even though, as I pointed out last evening, the Kenosha taxpayers' equity in their home in some cases has been wiped out and in other cases has been substantially reduced, even though equalized value in this county has decreased over $1 billion, and it decreased the prior year over 8%. So keep that in mind before you say to the taxpayer, you pay it. If you have some other kind of way of paying this, such as, well, we'll play around with, for example, vacancy adjustment, and we'll boost that up, and that was reduced this year because there was a difficult time meeting that vacancy adjustment. You can play around with those numbers, but that isn't real money. That isn't real money until there's an actual vacancy. Or if you start playing around with the sheriff's anticipated federal inmate number of 200 and say, well, we'll increase that to 250, or we'll increase it to 300. That isn't real money. Those aren't real people until the federal government says, Kenosha, here's in excess of 200. Now, the reports that we're getting at the Finance Committee is that 200 is a realistic figure. Because if you budget for more than 200 and you don't meet that, he's going to run a deficit as he is this year. And again, the finance director will tell you that the sheriff has reported that the sheriff's budget may reach $1 million for the year 2012. He's making every effort to reduce that. But why does he have that kind of deficit? Because we're not hitting the numbers of federal inmates. And he also reported rather extensively to the Finance Committee why the federal government is not sending as many immigration holds as they used to, and why it is anticipated in the future that they probably won't either. They're looking for a different type of facility than Kenosha has. That's the new philosophy from the Department of Immigration in Washington. There's nothing we can do about that. So I would urge you, don't play around with that 200 number. Another number I would suggest you don't play around with is the anticipated sales tax revenues. Those are anticipated. It's not guaranteed. And we're anticipating that we're going to have some increases, as the sheet will tell you, of approximately a $300,000 increase over the prior year. Again, that's an estimate, our best estimate. Are you going to say, well, I'll tell you what, we'll pay for this because we'll increase that up to $1 million. We'll add $700,000 budget balanced. That's the kind of financial voodoo don't get involved in. Those are artificial figures. Those are artificial estimates. They make you feel good at the beginning of the budget time when you walk out the door and say, we gave you the money. At the end of the year, we have to say, we have to take it away. And that's when you're real quiet, and that's when you blame somebody else. You blame the federal government, but you don't take responsibility yourselves. That's why I'm saying tonight you've got to be responsible in dealing with this. I appreciate the position that the jailers have set forth this evening and last night. I supported you a year ago, but that wasn't the decision of the Finance Committee. It wasn't the decision of the board. It isn't the decision of the Finance Committee this year. And if the economy changes, we get better revenues than we anticipate, better sales tax revenues, or more federal inmates than the 200 anticipated, or something else along that line. We can make adjustments. We've heard you loud and clear. It's not that we're unsympathetic. It's just that we have to live within the budget and revenues we have. I think those are some of the issues that I wanted to highlight here this evening, and I would appreciate your support of the Finance Committee's budget as written. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Brunig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the finalization of the budget resolution, the mobile command vehicle was removed from the resolution. The original resolution stated that the sheriff purchase a mobile command vehicle in 2013 and that the county reimburse itself in 2014 for the expenditure that is budgeted over 2 years, and if the sheriff's budget for federal housing revenue ends 2013 with a surplus, said surplus may be used to fund the 2014 portion of said vehicle rather than using bonding proceeds. Wow, when I first read that, I had no idea what it meant. And apparently a lot of other people didn't either. As I talked to Supervisor Molinaro yesterday, he gave me some information. He told me that he was under the impression that the Sheriff's Department could purchase this beginning in 2013, and he's correct. It is the understanding that the statement that they could purchase it in 2013, but it was the intent of the county executive, who I spoke to today, and the sheriff, that the vehicle was to be purchased in 2014. This year, next year, Supervisor Rose is correct. It's going to affect the bond levy no matter when we put it in. But we have used prior year revenues over and over from the Sheriff's Department to fill budget holes, and we have put this vehicle on hold. We have taken it out of the budget for several years now. I don't think that we can wait any longer. I left a list of items on everyone's desk so that they can look through it. There's a lot of items on that list that could be quick fixes, but the fact is that they have to have this jump started. The vehicle doesn't run, and that's an issue. When they found out the vice president was coming into town, they had a 4-day notice to get it up and running, and they had to have a tow truck standing by to make sure that it would leave here, get to where it had to go, and come back. When they have Country Thunder, they have to begin working on the vehicle 1 month in advance to make sure that it can get out to the site and it can be operable while it's sitting out there for the 4-day event. What would happen if there was an actual emergency in Kenosha County? What about the effects of Hurricane Sandy that we just experienced? Could be much worse. The plane that landed on I-94, what if there was a pileup over there? The tornadoes that came through Wheatland and Summers a couple years ago, the command unit needs to be out there for all of these issues. If it ran, it would go on calls that are perceived to take more than an average call. It would go to fatal accidents, especially in inclement weather, to homicides, call-ups for the bomb unit, the tactical team, hostage situations, missing or lost citizens, flooding from the Fox River that we see every single year, tornadoes and other natural disasters, backup to dispatch, Country Thunder, the county fair, These are all calls that they receive every single month that they need to have someone out there helping with. Let's all remember that the executive's budget came in at 0% with this vehicle command unit in the budget. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the County Board, I move to reinstate that paragraph in its original form to the resolution. Thank you.
Motion has been made by Supervisor Brunig to put the mobile command vehicle back in as it was originally presented. Do I have a second? Second. Second by Supervisor Arrington. On the motion, Supervisor Noble.
Oh, first of all, can you, the motion, please? I mean, the original paragraph.
Go ahead, Okay, go ahead.
The paragraph states that the sheriff purchased a mobile command vehicle in 2013 and that the county reimburse itself in 2014 for the expenditure that is budgeted over 2 years, and if the sheriff's budget for federal housing revenue ends 2013 with a surplus, said surplus may be used to fund the 2014 portion of said vehicle rather than using bonding proceedings.
Not sure done. Supervisor.
Okay, I understand. I'm going to make an amendment to that. And I wish I had that in front of me. Could I get a copy of that? And I'll speak to it after, if I get a second. But if the sheriff budget for federal housing revenue ends 2013 with a surplus, said surplus may be used to fund not to exceed $250 in jail employees' pay in lieu of holiday pay by dividing the amount by the number of hours worked, the number of hours the employees worked in 2013.
Corporation Counsel, there's a point
You want me to
of order.
read it again?
Pardon me?
Well, first of all, I guess maybe I should explain a little bit. I'm fundamentally opposed of using surplus revenue to fund capital projects, especially capital, and I wasn't in favor of it last year, especially a capital piece of equipment that's going to last for 20 years. I mean, just common sense accounting, you spread that. Those are the things you bond for. Those are the things you spread the cost of over 10 years, 20 years, or whatever you're bonding for. So I don't think it's appropriate to have that language in there, but I do think it's appropriate to show the jailers that we've been listening, and I am saying we're listening, we hear you. I'm explaining it. Well,
I think the
I'm trying
reason
to
I'm giving him
explain
the
it, and if
latitude
I'm-
is because he is making comments regarding the bonding of it. So that's where, go ahead, Supervisor
all right.
Noble.
I mean, hear me out, and then if I'm out of order, then let me know when I'm finished. So I'm talking about, I don't feel that we should do it that way, and what I'm saying is I'm changing the language so to say that instead of, if we have a surplus revenue, we use that surplus revenue to fund the mobile command center. I'm saying we authorize, whether it be in this paragraph or in another paragraph, up to, not to exceed $250,000 to fund holiday pay for jail employees.
Okay, Supervisor Noble, there was a point of order as far as whether or not you can bring salaries into that resolution, and I'll ask the Corporation Counsel about that. Is there a problem with him bringing that into that motion amendment? Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
I understand Supervisor Noble's motion It is not germane to the amendment motion that's on the table. Although it's a perfectly valid motion to the main motion, it's not to the one that's currently being discussed.
And this is coming, when we get done talking about this, it's coming. I'll just make a motion then that we eliminate the portion that says that it's budgeted over 2 years, period, and not giving authority to the sheriff to budget federal housing revenue surpluses to pay for the second portion, the second half. He's going to have to wait until 2014 to buy the mobile command unit.
So a clarification of your motion is to eliminate any excess
Surplus
revenues to be
surplus
part of it.
revenues.
What you want to do is just make it half bonded in this year and half bonded in next year.
Exactly. That's got to be germane, right?
I think so.
So that's my motion.
Okay, on that motion, Supervisor Rose.
All right. I think this adds to the confusion. How do you bond for something that you're buying this year by paying half this year and half next year? I mean, you're either for it. It's important enough to buy it this year or not. And, how did we get involved in this mobile command unit? The current one was given to us. It wasn't authorized and purchased by the board. Never had one in the past. But I think you have to be a little more creative on things like this. And I noted when Supervisor Bruning, Mr. Chairman, was talking about what its uses were, and she mentioned it would be very useful at Country Thunder. Why aren't we asking them to pay for this? I mean, these are the kind of things that I see the village of Pleasant Prairie doing all of the time. I see they build recplexes and add on to those recplexes and do many other public projects by requesting the companies that have moved there to make a contribution to the public good by various projects. Country Thunder is not a nonprofit organization. They're making a lot of money because they come back year after year. They must be making a lot of money. They're getting the biggest names in country music to come. Why aren't we saying to them, you come up with the money because this is something that we need to, as part of our protection of the community and the people in attendance. Why aren't they being asked to pay for it? Why is the general public being asked to pay for something such as Country Thunder? There are other ways of financing this, far more creative than just passing along to the taxpayers. Now, I would oppose, I say, adding it to the budget bonding list here. I mean, where does it stop? We're at $4,006 on the list. We're going up. We ought to be going down. If on the one hand you say to the Finance Committee and the administration, we want Kenosha County to be a AAA county, we just don't want to do the things that are required to make it AAA. This is based upon decisions of finances, not good fellowship. And on the issue of surpluses, don't tie up those surpluses. Those are end of the year. I don't know what's going to happen, and neither do you know what's going to happen at the end of 2013 when we review the situation. There may be other things that need to be handled at the end of 2013, which those surpluses might be used for. What if the sheriff doesn't hit his 200 number for federal inmates and hits 190? He's going to have a deficit. Then what? We need those surpluses. Brookside has a surplus here. Is anybody suggesting that we use the Brookside surplus for the mobile command unit? What if the Sheriff's Department does run a surplus in 2013 and we have some big public disaster such as New York and New Jersey had? Are we prepared then in our budget for that? don't tie up those budgets. This is not something that we must have in 2013. These proposals, I find, always come to us with a sense of urgency. We must have it now, even though the one that we have was given to us. There was no sense of urgency in the past. I would suggest there's no sense of urgency now. And when you use Country Thunder as an example of a sense of urgency, that's just entertainment. This is real money. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Molinaro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I spoke against this a couple of times in committee, at the Finance Committee. I spoke against it at the Judiciary and Law Committee before it was moved to Finance. And I'll speak against it again tonight. Not because I don't believe it is necessary, not because I don't believe it will serve a purpose within the Sheriff's Department, because, as I've said about a number of other things, this simply isn't the year to be able to do it. And I realize the sheriff and his staff have heard this more than once. It's been a unit they've been after for a while. I understand that. But if you recall a few years back, I also made the statement to the gentleman who Supervisor Rose credited tonight, and I credit myself for turning the golf courses around, that they do deserve to be compensated for their efforts. But I didn't create the current economic situation we are in. They're part of it, unfortunately, and they are just going to have to wait. It is the nature of the beast. I have heard for 10 terms in this county board, it's only bonded money. It won't affect the levy. We have, just for point of reference, 2012. $42 million in general obligation debt. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. $95 million in general obligation debt. $70 million in OPEB liabilities as of 2012. $3 million other long-term obligations for a total of $168 million of debt, which I will point out has come down significantly since '99, again in 2007, to the point where it's at in 2012. So yes, we are making improvements, and we need to continue to trend in that direction. But don't say that it's only bonded money and it won't affect the levy. Even the Kenosha News wrote that. Well, how do you think this money gets paid back? So 2013, unfortunately to the sheriff and his staff, simply isn't the year I can support this once again. My biggest bend with this whole thing is they heard me speak against it at the Judiciary and Law Committee. I didn't see this document at the Judiciary and Law Committee. I didn't see anyone at the committee read through this document while they were talking about it. I made the motion at the Finance Committee the first night when the sheriff presented his budget to remove it. It failed. I wasn't given this document. From the Judiciary and Law Committee meeting to the night of the Finance Committee meeting, I didn't get a call from anybody in the Sheriff's Department explaining to me why it was necessary. From the first night of the budget hearings when I made a motion to get rid of it to the last night when I made a motion to get rid of it, I didn't get a call from anybody. But we brought a staff down from Milwaukee to sell me on a $42,000 grant for drunk drivers. This is the first I've seen this document, contrary to what Supervisor Brunig told me this evening, which is apparently from the Sheriff's Department. I've seen it before. Unequivocally, I have not seen this document, period. Truth be told, Sheriff, and anyone else who may care, I have designed a number of similar units with a local manufacturer up in Racine, probably a couple dozen of these for everything from the food industry to mobile command to you name it. So not only do I know I haven't seen the document, I can read through this and understand every bit of it. If this was so important, and we're going to talk more about this as I trust Supervisor Noble is going to make his motion. The sheriff came forward with a budget that did not meet the requirements of zero. Not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm saying it didn't meet the zero. He's 1.375% or something. So someone else sacrificed somewhere to be at zero across the board. Presented the budget with little information on the mobile command unit. $1 million deficit we're potentially facing right now. I realize there's some talk that it's potentially to be absorbed somehow. Get the updates regularly at the Finance Committee meeting, but you can't dismiss the fact that it exists right now. So we're going to take a department that has a deficit, short 13 jailers, a disagreement on whether the ones that are currently working are being paid appropriately. The explanation to that question, which is all tied to why I can't support this unit this year from the sheriff, was I think they should be paid. Oh, and by the way, I think the deputies ought to get their health insurance changed, but I don't have a plan to do it. And then to support that, members of the committee point out that I was hard on the sheriff by saying it's his responsibility to figure it out. That it's unfair to ask the sheriff to do that. Well, who else is going to do it? I asked this chamber. Who else is responsible for the sheriff's budget? So we had all of this discussion and debate. We're talking about a deficit. We're talking about bonding that right now I don't believe we can afford. We're talking about a difference of opinion, whether or not the entire staff is being paid appropriately. We've got a budget that's already over 1% increase when the direction was zero. And we're going to go ahead and pay for a bond for a $500,000 unit, which I will point out, when I asked the question at Finance how it would be paid for, I was told that it wouldn't be purchased until the end of the year, near the end of the year, when they had a real good sense of where the surplus is going to be within the sheriff's department for the inmates. And then it would be delivered in 2014. And then I get the budget resolution, and I appreciate Supervisor Brunick's point, but the proof is in the language. January 1, 2013, he could have purchased that unit based on the language that was presented to the Finance Committee. Was not the answer I was given, and we've been down that road before with other projects where we've spent dollars. My commitment in committee was at the end of the year, if there is surplus to cover the cost, the full cost of this unit, bring it to the Finance Committee. I will champion the cause and support it without any hesitation. And to the sheriff's point, he's absolutely correct. Surplus year over year, and it's spent somewhere else. The commitment is to spend it on that unit, but I can't do it with bonded money in the 2013 budget because it does affect the levy. It affects the levy to the tune of $168,371,640 of total long-term obligations for Kenosha County. We have 166 population in this county. We're talking about $168 million in debt. Yeah, we're headed in the right direction. We're doing the right thing. This is not headed in the right direction. Hold this off. Support what the committee did. Stay true to what you said on this board when we debated the zero. When the county executive finally said, you want to play the game on the county board, argue amongst yourselves, I'm going to bring a zero budget forward. You want to follow suit? Follow suit. So I remember who voted for that zero. It's before you tonight. Adding this money back in, I don't care how they spin it. It is not a zero budget. It's another $500,000 to be paid back on the levy. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor Ron Frederick. Supervisor Noble.
Well, you've given a lot of latitude to speak about pretty much anything, but the amendment itself is to, and my amendment is to eliminate the carryover, so that if they have a surplus, they can use it to fund the second half of the mobile command unit. Like I said before, I don't think that's proper. I don't think it's a good accounting practice to get into, and that's why I made that amendment. I want to say that the Finance Committee, when the sheriff was present, supported basically this resolution as amended on a 4-3 vote. When the sheriff wasn't present, a few nights later, and why would the sheriff call anybody on the Finance Committee? Because when he left that night, it had Finance Committee approval, and it went on, you know, it went on to what I thought. I came that last night, I thought we were going to be going over the budget resolution, but they ended up going over the CIP. So many department heads weren't there to answer the questions as things were being cut, and the sheriff wasn't there to answer the questions. Luckily, for the sheriff's department, the chief deputy was there and fielded the questions with regards to his department, but some of the other departments didn't have anybody there. So the point is, it passed, and I'm still speaking to the amendment. The resolution as amended did pass Finance Committee 4-3. 3 nights later, or 4 nights later, one of the members of the Finance Committee flip-flopped and went against it. So it had, at one time it had the support of the Finance Committee. And I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Supervisor Noble. Supervisor Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are we on an amendment or on the main motion?
We're on the amendment.
I'll wait till the main motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Rose.
Just so that everybody is clear about procedure here, and this has been the tradition of the Finance Committee for many years. All budgets are presented. All initial votes are tentative approval, and that's part of the motion, tentative approval. And every department head understands that it's tentative approval. Final approval comes at the final night of the committee. That was Monday, and those votes is the recommendation of the committee to the board. So, and we advised people if they chose to be there, that was up to them. So there wasn't any deception, or wool wasn't pulled over anybody's eyes here whatsoever. We followed protocol.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Molinaro. Supervisor Noble.
Ask for the next resolution.
Thank you. Supervisor Dodge. No.
Yes, I seconded that motion. Originally, my feelings were that if we couldn't afford to help the jailers, we couldn't afford a command unit. Now, when Supervisor Noble come up with an idea, I thought it was worth seconding so we could discuss it. I've talked with a number of people for the last few weeks, yesterday included and this morning included, about the jailers, and that was one option that came up, and that's why I seconded that motion. I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Dodge. Supervisor Rose.
With the previous question.
Okay, what's before us is to bond for the mobile command vehicle, half this year and half next year, without designating the surplus of any inmates. Is that correct, maker of the motion?
Amendment is really just to eliminate the part where we're going to use surplus revenue in 2013 surplus revenue to fund the second half. So in other words, there is no using surplus revenues to fund the mobile command unit. That's strictly my amendment. You referred, in effect, to the entire resolution.
Well,
you're speaking of it in terms of what it would be. I don't know, however you want to say it. Ask Corporation Counsel, possibly.
okay, well, you need to get the motion clear. What do you? Go ahead.
I think Supervisor Noble repeated it more accurately as he stated it a few minutes ago when he first made it. The motion before the board is as he just mentioned, and not as exactly as phrased by you.
Okay, then what I'm going to ask is Supervisor Noble to exactly state his motion so that we all know what we're voting for.
My amendment basically is to eliminate the verbiage in the original, amendment by Supervisor Brunig to eliminate using 2013 surplus to fund the mobile command unit. So it would still have the, so that's strictly the amendment. That's all you'd be voting on. But then if it passed, if my amendment passes, which is what you were saying, then it would simply be we would bond for half of the mobile command unit in 2013 and the other half in 2014.
Okay, Supervisor Noble's motion is to eliminate the talk about the surplus in Supervisor Brunig's motion. Okay, that's what you want, right?
That's exactly.
Make another motion, they can do so, but you don't have a motion to on top of her motion to defeat her motion. That's merely a no vote.
Her motion comes first. No.
That's not an amendment. That's not.
Hold on. Corporation Counsel.
In my opinion, Supervisor Noble's motion is in order.
I did look at her motion, so I'm trusting what they read. He's taken the surplus verbiage out of her motion. Okay, so it's just a bond for the half of the command vehicle in 2013, and then any excess surplus is to be eliminated from her motion, Supervisor Brunig's motion. Is that clear, Supervisor Noble? That's exactly what you want. Okay.
All you're voting
Yeah,
on with this vote is eliminating this, if you vote yes, then you agree with me and we eliminate using surplus money to fund the mobile command unit. That's all you're voting on in this first vote.
Is that clear, Supervisor Rose?
The Corporation Counsel interpreted to mean like you either vote for bonding or vote for surplus.
That's not what I.
I thought you stated it correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not what I heard. So right now you're voting on the elimination of the surplus and keeping the bonding for the mobile command vehicle in 2013. That's what you're voting for, yes or no? Okay?
Agreed.
Majority? Okay, all those in favor?
Roll call. Exactly.
Okay. Okay, motion to close the debate. I thought he was just moving the motion. Motion to close debate. All those in favor?
Roll
Aye.
call.
Roll call? Okay. To close debate right now, that's all you're voting on. Who seconded Supervisor Rose's motion? Step up, somebody. Okay, then we're not going to vote on that since there's no second. Debate continues. What? Supervisor Molinaro?
Mr. Chairman, you move right on to Supervisor Noble's amendment to the amendment. So if you'd like to ask for a second to close debate, that would be appropriate.
I think I just did. Is there a second to closing the debate?
I'll second.
Seconded by Supervisor Elverman. So we'll roll call vote on whether to close debate. Okay, debate is closed. On the motion by Supervisor Noble.
Order, I would think that that motion would be out of order because it came after the motion to close debate.
Okay, and I'll refer again to the
So-
Corporation Council.
So therefore, we're really closing debate on Supervisor Brunig's motion.
Now, case, Corporation Council.
I believe that Supervisor Noble's motion is in order, and it came well before the motion to close debate.
So you concur that we're voting on Supervisor Noble's motion?
Yes.
Okay. We're going to vote on Supervisor Noble's motion. Roll call is requested.
Majority, which is tonight it's 12.
Fails for lack of majority. Back to Supervisor Brunig's motion. Any comments on Supervisor Brunig's motion? No? Okay. Supervisor Kohlmeyer? You're good.
Thank you, Chairman. I supported this mobile command unit in the Finance Committee. I think this is an important and a necessary expense. In my 3 years here, this has been brought up every year. Every year except for this year, looks like we're not going to, the sheriff's unit's not going to be delivering a surplus, but they've delivered a surplus every year. The debt limit total in Kenosha County, the reason we got here is not because of this budget. I want to point that out. This is years and years of overspending. This is the first year that we've gotten a 0% budget. In my mind, this is the year to tackle something like this. We finally got our expenses under control. This is the most responsible budget that Kenosha County has seen in 25 years from a financial standpoint. We're the debt limit, the debt that we're adding this year, the new capital expenses that we're capitalizing are the lowest in years. And in my mind, if this is a necessary expense, why not do it now? Interest rates are as low as they're probably ever going to be. This is something that's going to last 25 years. It's a public safety issue. The unit doesn't even start. I mean, I'm just thinking about what if a disaster happens. It's kind of, in my mind, like an insurance policy. Nobody necessarily wants to buy insurance, but you take it just in case an emergency happens. And if an emergency happens right now, this vehicle can't start. I want you all to think about that before you take this vote. This is a small piece. I understand we have to be conservative and watch all of our expenses more than anybody. Believe me, like, we've gone through this list. In my mind, this is the most important thing on the list. I mean, we can cut wherever else we want to cut. So that's my position, and that's why I supported it.
Thank you, Supervisor Kohlmeyer. Supervisor Noble?
Yeah,
You're good?
now I'm debating if I want to say anything. I'm really not in favor of using surplus revenue to purchase a piece of equipment that's going to last for 20 years. In the next few minutes, I'm going to have to decide whether I'm going to support this now or not. I think maybe you folks just didn't understand what I was trying to do, but all right, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Noble. Supervisor Grady?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As discussed earlier, this has received extensive coverage, both Finance Committee and elsewhere. It's gone back several times, and as you can tell from past proceedings, there has been some dissent in terms of how this whole thing has played out. I think to a member on the Finance Administration Committee, there was consensus that at some point in time, hopefully sooner rather than later, we need a vehicle to replace the one we have. I don't think anyone disputed that. I don't think anyone disputed the current unit was failing and was on its way out. The thing that we're really left with, when you take a look at the big picture, is basically $500,000 in 2 budget cycles, which winds up being bonded money. And bonded money, of course, is your most expensive way of going. It costs you the most because you're paying for it over a period of years. You're paying principal and interest. So when we take a look at this whole thing, it was the mood, it was the consensus of the Finance Committee. Yes, we do need one of these. Yes, we do need to get one at some point in time. But with our current debt burden, which, you know, is very aptly illustrated in the earlier part of this discussion, the highest per capita in the state of Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken, looking at the back page of your budget summary here, it was not a prudent thing to do at this time. And it was not saying we don't need it, it's not saying we shouldn't have it. On for it was not the route Finance Administration Committee wanted to go. That's reflected in the vote, and that's a position I support. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Grady. Supervisor Ron Frederick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Supervisor Molinaro said, and Supervisor Noble said, the first vote we had on this with the sheriff, and that was when the sheriff was there, was 4-3 to go ahead with the, and if I remember right, it was to bond for half of it 1 year and half of it the other. And I supported that. It was kind of against my, I didn't, you know, he's been coming in for this vehicle for years and years, okay? And it seems that way anyway. I've only been around 3, but it seems like it. And so I thought, well, okay, if he can bond it over 2 years, let's get it, because every time we hear the story, last year we heard it, when I heard it was when I was on Judiciary and Law, that he needed the vehicle, but they didn't use it because it would never start. Well, I guess I thought to myself, first of all, why don't you buy a couple of batteries or something, but maybe that's not the, you know, just it won't start. If my car don't start, I go out and buy a new battery. But that aside, I'm sure the technology on this thing is behind the times. And I guess I supported it at that time, and the vote was 4-3, and the term was yours. Somebody flipped, and it went 3-4. Okay, so it lost. I would support this, if it did not include the fact that we're going to, if he can buy it this next year, if you got surplus funds. And I got a problem with that. And the problem I got with that is we've got jailers that are not going to get paid their holidays, but we're going to let him take surplus funds if he earns any and go buy a vehicle that he used one time last year for Country Thunder, and he said he would use it more. So with that on there, with the idea that we're going to use surplus funds if he earns them, I can't support this. I did support it at committee with the bonding going 2 years, but I did not support it. I would not support it to take surplus funds and go buy this vehicle while we got some employees out there that are really getting shortchanged. I think they are, and so I can't support this on that with that on there. I just can't. And I urge you not to support it, because if you go out and justify you're going to use surplus funds to buy a vehicle that he doesn't use hardly, and then you're not going to give them their holidays. That don't make no sense.
Thank you, Supervisor Frederick. Supervisor Montemuro.
Thank you, Chairman. I do see the need for this vehicle. And the way I understand it, it'll be used quite often if they have it. The reason they can't use it is they can't get it where they want to get it. And it is a public safety issue. The problem that I have with all of this is I also feel for the jailers, and I know money's tight. So I had trouble with the budget, and I tried to bring it up at the Finance Committee. I mean, not very much, and Brookside's wonderful, but Brookside makes a profit, yet we're bonding for some of the things in there. You know, Department of Public Works has $1.5 million worth of equipment bonded. You know, so there's places where money, if had to be, could be looked at and allow this to happen. And in terms of making money off of this, we could charge a rent every year for using it at Country Thunder. Even if you charge $15,000 or $20,000, in 10 years you'd pay for half of it. But there's ways to do this. The question is, do you realize that this is needed for the safety of the community, particularly with how much has been going on? So I feel the sheriff needs this. I also agree with Supervisor Noble that if there's any extra money in his budget, it should be for the jailers. We have to deal with that in another issue, and I understand that, so I'm not bringing it up here. But I do believe we need this, and I think that there are other places if we had to do that. You know, I worked at this for a while. Even the sheriff's department has a number of passenger vans, you know, budgeted for 5 years. But in 2 years, he gets 2 of them. That's 66,000 you could save. So there's different ways to do this, you know, if we really need it, which I think we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Montemuro. Supervisor Rose.
I think this board's got to be more cognizant of the fact that the point that Mr. Grady makes, we're #1 in overall debt per capita. Oh, #1. Is that where you want to be, #1? And how do you get to be #1? $4,002 per capita. You always say yes. It's always essential. You come to the board, if one time you're defeated, the second time, the third time, they say yes. That's it. That's the protocol. That's how you get to be #1 here. And we've got to begin by saying no. And when we talk about surpluses here, let's talk about deficits. Let's talk about reality. This year, 2012, $1 million deficit. And how did we get that? Because the numbers don't, the revenue projections don't match the expenses. This budget, 200 inmates, now they're going to hopefully match the expenditures. We pulled that in 2012. The expectation was greater than the delivery. What happens? $1 million deficit. And we're talking about the surpluses. We're off in Never Never Land, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk reality here. Let's get, I want to move that number down from 4,002. If you really think this is that important, this is #1, public safety. You know, one of the best arguments that one can make for anything is public safety. We can do that with the jailer's holiday pay too. That's public safety. We can wrap ourselves in the American flag on every issue, public safety. What's the argument for public safety here? All right, if it is that public safety, it's so important, let's go to page 3 of the Ehlers report. You have it on your desk. And take a look at the list here. If it's that important, start striking $500,000 worth of items and substitute that. There's got to be some priorities here. And those priorities, if you're telling me that public safety is #1, it certainly needs to be, it certainly is going to be ahead of the laundry washer dryer replacement. Isn't public safety ahead of that one? Or how about the inmate property storage system? You know, they've got one now. Isn't it ahead of that? Isn't it ahead of the administration building restoration at $100,000? Isn't it ahead of that? Or the Petts River restoration at $50,000? How about Rotary Moors at $55,000? Public safety issue? You're telling me this is public safety, more important. Then let's do priorities. It's got to be more important than a lawnmower. Then strike the lawnmower. Strike the laundry washer and dryer. We've got a washer and dryer. We've got some trucks. Put those off another year. We got a bunch of trucks here. 3/4 ton pickup. This is public safety we're talking about. Remodel bathrooms, Kenosha County Jail. Isn't it $49,000? Must be more important. I've used all the bathrooms in all the public buildings. They look adequate. We're talking about public safety. You mean you can't strike remodeling the bathrooms? Plumbing modifications, $70,000. What's that? That doesn't sound like something we can't postpone, or replace heating, ventilating, and air conditioning units. You've been in the buildings yourselves. We can't get by with striking that one. I can go on here, but if you're telling me about public safety then I want to call you on it. Because if that's number one, public safety, then let's strike $500,000 from this list and substitute it. I'll yield my position in line here to speak to anyone who wants to start replacing $500,000 worth of these items with that sheriff's mobile unit. We're talking about public safety. Any volunteers want to do that? I yield the floor to any of you. I yield the floor.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Decker.
Point of clarification, or I'd like a little clarification here on the resolution, page 6. Second, be it further resolved that if the sheriff budget for federal housing revenue ends 2013 with a surplus, said surplus may be used to fund a mobile command unit vehicle with approval of Finance and Administration, Judiciary Law Committees, and the County Board. So what we are discussing is Supervisor Bruning's amendment, which, in addition to what I just read, adds about bonding. So we're discussing about using surplus revenue, but that's already in here. Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Supervisor Alverman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Without trying to sound sarcastic, I'm really not trying to be sarcastic here, but the majority of what I've heard so far this evening reminds me truly of an amateur hour as far as people being prepared. I've heard people stumble through an amendment and a resolution just like their first thought about it was this evening, having to get clarifications. If something is that important to me, I come prepared. I told my committee when we had our first look at our budget, don't embarrass us in front of the Finance Committee. You have 3 shots at this. If you want to make changes, do it tonight. And that was at the Facilities and Public Works meeting. The next time you have a shot at it is at Finance. You do it there. To come bumbling in here this evening and just be wording your amendment or your resolution, to me, I said amateur hour, and that's exactly what it is. Now, if you're looking at coming up with $500,000 and you think you can just pick and choose, Supervisor Rose was saying it in a much different way. He was saying, you think you can do this, go ahead. This is exactly what I'm saying. You come in with no knowledge of what you're looking at and say we don't need to spend $500,000 on HVAC at such and such a building, which I believe could be out at the House of Corrections. You don't know why we're doing that. There's been 8 months of studies. There's been engineering on any one of these items. There's been hours and hours and hours of consideration and months of consideration. To sit here and embarrass yourself saying, I think we can come up with $500,000, shame on you for not being prepared. And I'm talking to a whole group of you here. I thought I was well past having to speak to adults this way, but this conversation tonight is one of the low points that I've seen this year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Hallman.
Motion to call the question.
It's been moved to call the question and seconded by Supervisor Rose. Roll call is requested. On calling the question, State your point of information.
I'm assuming for all of us here in this room, we are on Supervisor Bruning's amendment, is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
No, we're on closing.
Right, calling the
Right,
question
right.
for that.
Closing debate on that question, yes. That passes. The question is closed. No more debate. So we are back to Supervisor Brunig's motion. We'll take a vote on that. Roll call is requested. That motion passes, and that is in the budget. In the resolution. Okay. Continue. Now we're back on the initial question as amended. Did you want? Okay, now we're back on the resolution as amended. The main resolution. Okay, seeing no lights, all those in favor? Roll call requested. We're voting on the policy resolution that was moved with the amendment of Supervisor Brunig incorporated in it. Roll call has been requested. Right, it's on the whole, the budget. As amended, Supervisor Noble, state your point of information.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you normally ask 3 times if citizens can comment, but you can quickly go to the vote with, it just seems to me a little bit rushed, but we're there, so fine. So we're voting on the budget.
As amended. That passes. Point of order. Who stated that?
I did.
Okay.
I need the record to show that my vote was, in fact, yes, in favor of the budget as amended, not in opposition to it.
Okay. You need to adjust the board, or you can just make note of that. Thank you, Supervisor Molinaro.
New business resolution from Finance Administration regarding initial resolution authorizing the issuance of general obligation promissory notes in an amount not to exceed $5,809,259 for budgeted capital projects. Rose, yes. Ron Frederick, yes. O'Day, yes. Grady, yes. Colmeyer, yes. Kubicki, yes. Molinaro, yes.
Supervisor Rose.
Mr. Chairman, I would move resolution number 59.
A motion has been made by Supervisor Rose to move resolution number 59, seconded by Supervisor Grady. Supervisor Rose.
Mr. Chairman, the resolution before you bonds the various items which have been included in the budget, and I drew that list to your attention and would do so again, page 3 of the Ehlers report. Those are the list. The list was amended by vote of the board. It was Supervisor Brunig's amendment that adds one item to that list. I would bring to your attention, however, that that this initial resolution must pass by 2/3. This resolution before you does not include that money. that amendment would require 2/3.
Corporation Counsel,
It's,
I think it's 3/4.
it's three quarters.
Three.
Well, the concept is still there. It needs to be amended to reflect her addition, and it requires 3/4 vote, so.
That's correct.
And if it's not, if it doesn't achieve that, it's not included.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Brunig?
No, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other lights, roll call is requested. Oh, state your point of order.
Just so that it's clear, resolution number 59 is for $5,809,000, $8,809,259. It does not include the money for the mobile command unit.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Brunig?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Supervisor Rhodes for clarifying that. I would like to make an amendment to resolution.
State your point of order.
It was made very clear what the situation was. Supervisor Brunig was recognized, passed on the opportunity. You asked any other comments? There were none. Asked for a vote. I asked for a roll call. Let's move on. Roll call has been asked and requested, and you recognized it. Time to take the vote on the bonding.
Okay, to the Corporation Counsel, is that correct?
Technically, it is correct, but the chair can allow some latitude. There was more conversation after the request for roll call vote by Supervisor Rose, and Supervisor Brunig was recognized thereafter, so I think there's some latitude to make a motion.
Thank you, Corporation Counsel. It's been moved by Supervisor Brunig and seconded by Supervisor Anita Johnson to include the motion for the mobile command vehicle to be included in Resolution 59. Roll call requested on that. Yes. State your point of information, Supervisor Elverman.
Were we given a stated amount for this bonding?
Through the
No,
supervisor, let's call on Mr. Geertsen to clarify that. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The addition would be $452,600, and the total initial resolution would then go from the 5,809,259 to the 6,261,259.
State those numbers again, please.
$452,000 even.
Supervisor Elverman.
I was under the impression that the motion in the budget proposal by Supervisor Bruning was to do half of the bonding this year, and half the next year. So why would we be doing the total here?
Mr. Geertsen.
The original budget submitted by the executive planned, as stated, to fund half of it this year, half of it in 2014, half in 2013, half in 2014. We would sell the bonds in 2013 for 1/2 of the cost, sell the remainder in 2014 for 1/2 of the cost. But the intent was also to get the bonds approved in total so that we weren't left without approval for the second half of, building a half a bridge and then not being able to finish it, type of an example. So.
Thank you, Supervisor Elverman. Thank you, Supervisor Grady. Okay, we're doing a roll call on Supervisor Brunig's motion to add to Resolution 59. opposite majority on this one and 18 on the second. Okay. That motion passes 15-7. No, but the motion to increase it with Supervisor Brunig's motion needs a simple majority. The next one, when we approve the Resolution 59, we will need the 3/4. Okay, we will ask Mr. Geertsen.
To amend takes 18.
To amend takes 18?
To amend takes 18. Yeah.
You sure about that? All right.
Okay, so the motion to add this in fails. Now we'll take a vote on the resolution without that in it. Roll call is required. No, it's 3/4. Supervisor Decker?
What
Stage
happens
point.
if this motion fails?
Then there's no bonding.
Okay, thank you.
State your point of information.
If I understand this correctly, we're voting on the original bonded amount, not the addition for the, which was presented earlier. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Supervisor Kohlmeyer, did you have something to say? No? Okay. Go ahead.
No, we voted to include the bonded amount in the budget resolution. It won't be funded, basically, is what we're saying.
That's exactly what
Okay, I just
we're
want to
saying.
understand. Okay.
Supervisor Molinaro?
Is this still open for debate or no?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I'd like then through the chair to our counsel, either Mr. Harrigan or Mr. Geertsen, whomever can answer it. If this resolution before us now, which is the original resolution for the authorization, is not passed with the 18 votes, what are the ramifications of that, please?
Mr. Geertsen?
We have about $10.5 million of projects in the budget. Actually, it's reduced by the 1.7 and the 500. So it's the original budget submitted was 10.5. We reduced it by 1.7, another $500,000, a couple other things. So it's a little over $9 million. So the Highway G and the Highway K.
My question is, we need 18 votes to pass the bonding resolution before us, correct? All right, so hypothetically, we don't get 18 for the 5 million. What happens to this resolution? I realize it fails. What are the ramifications of that failure?
$1 million of projects can't go forward. Right.
Exactly to the point that a number of us have made here this evening. There is a significant amount of time and energy. I made the comment at the finance hearings that we have the luxury or the detriment, I guess, of getting all of the information to make the decisions that we make. It's not bits and pieces. I came into the final evening dead set on voting against a particular issue. With a significant amount of conversation leading up to it, significant amount of conversation during the hearings, I changed my position because it was the right thing to do and all of the information was presented. So it does work for those who believe that it's just a, you have blinders on and you want to come in and say no to something. It does work. I can change my mind. So what I'm saying to you this evening is if you're going to vote against this because you didn't get this $500,000 bonding into this resolution before you, understand what those consequences are. This is something that is critical to continue to move forward. And we need to make sure that we're able to do that and that county government can continue to function. If you say no tonight, it's going to come back at some other point in time. It has to. Find another way, as I've said before, to fund it. But you need to vote for this resolution before you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Noble.
A question also. As it is, as I see it right now, the supermajority did not vote to add in the $450,000 so that we could bond for it. But the Finance Committee does have a resolution in the budget resolution that says if there's a surplus, they can use the entire $452,000 of surplus revenue to finance this mobile command unit, which I fundamentally don't understand that type of accounting, really.
We're having some clarification and it brought on further debate. I think voting on our bonding for the next year is important enough to have debate. If you want to call the question on it, feel free, but I think that we should have it all vetted. Continue, please. Supervisor Noble, you still have the floor.
A question to Corporation Council. With regards to a motion to reconsider Supervisor Brunig's motion to add in the $452,000, it has to be somebody from the prevailing side, and I'm confused in terms of who is on the prevailing side. I voted yes. Would that have been the prevailing side, being that it took a
Corporation Council? Who would?
The motion to reconsider is usually for the main resolution. But anyway, to answer your question, the person on the prevailing side would be the winner of the motion. In this case, that motion was defeated, so it's the people who voted against it.
Talk closer into the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's on, just talk closer to it. Okay.
All right. The notion of a motion to reconsider is a motion to reconsider the whole resolution, not necessarily addressed to an amendment of it. And the motion to reconsider is always made by the prevailing side. In this case, when a motion is defeated, it's the side that voted to defeat it. Right.
Okay. Supervisor Rose.
Let me just clarify what the clause at page 6 means, and that's the second clause at the top of page 6. It merely means that the board may, if so chooses, consider this issue once again in the event that there is a surplus. It doesn't, it's not a directive to the sheriff that he can spend it. It merely means that, Sheriff, you can bring it back and we will consider it again anew and make our decision anew. That means he may get it and he may not get it. It's a feel-good resolution. It's not a directive. It's not an authorization to spend money at all.
Thank you, Supervisor Rose. Supervisor Montemuro.
I just have one question, I'm sorry. If this motion fails, what's to stop another motion immediately after it to bond plus the mobile command center, a new number? We can't vote twice tonight? I'd like that clarified. What's the difference? Why can't we just vote one down and then add another motion if we wanted to? Or we can't vote twice? I need that clarified.
Okay, thank you. Corporation Counsel, would you please clarify that?
Yes, thank you. Give me a little time here. I'm going to.
I don't think you can immediately make a motion. That was just failed, and I do agree that it has to be an agenda item, so.
Okay. Under the rules of this county board in section 2.10, under subsection 2, a motion to reconsider can only be made at the same meeting or the very next meeting. So it could be made tonight.
So you're saying a motion to reconsider the amendment of Supervisor Brunig added to the the bonding?
Any of the motions made tonight could be reconsidered tonight or the next meeting.
And somebody to
The
reconsider?
motions that failed.
And you're saying that somebody who voted no would have to make a motion to reconsider? Is that what you're saying?
With regard to Supervisor Brunig's amendment of this bonding motion, it would have to be somebody who voted against it. Voted no.
To understand her question, I think her question was new bonding resolution, not amending this one, but a brand new resolution. Consideration motion, that's just a brand new bonding resolution. I call for a vote.
Okay, we have a request to close debate and move on to the vote. Is there a second? Second. It's been seconded by Supervisor Brunig to call the question, and we will vote on that first. Close debate, that's what we're voting on. Pardon me? Okay, the motion is to close debate. Why isn't it going? It passes, debate is closed. The motion before us is Resolution 59 with no amendment as originally stated. Did somebody call a roll call?
Yes.
Okay. Passes with the 18 it needs. It's been moved by Supervisor Decker to adjourn, seconded by Supervisor O'Day. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.